everybody.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Okay, we are getting set. So, for those of you who haven't seen any of my other broadcasts this week, I'm on a new system. I got a new computer this week, which is very exciting. But it also means,
And that's tonight's reason for us.
yeah, there's like a bunch of setup issues. So encountered a couple things on the way in this morning, but I think we're all set now. So,
And I promise you guys are not going to have to listen to my fan going. I'll mute myself out after I do the intro. But it's just too darn hot to turn the fan off, so sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
yeah, I understand. It's
I can't wait for this to be over. And I tell people like, oh, it's really hot in Texas. I'm like, no, it's just 3 months out of the year. So the other 9 months is like, oh yeah, it's just 3 months. But when you're in the middle of the 3 months,
yeah,
it is torture.
yeah. That's among the reasons I don't live in Texas, actually.
Yeah, but you get snow. See, I don't like snow either. I mean,
I love snow, so yeah, the cold. I love the cold.
I have this thing called Raynaud syndrome where the tips of my fingers go numb, and if I'm out for too long, it's almost like pre-frostbite. So,
Right.
What can I do?
Yep.
All right. We ready to roll? Dave's not with us tonight, unfortunately.
Yes, Dave's not with us, but yeah, Steven says Florida was the opposite. There were only 3 months or so that were almost tolerable.
That were decent.
I think I would feel the same way. I think I would.
That's
feel
the humidity. Do you get humid up? Does it get humid up in New Hampshire in the summer?
Not bad. Summer up here is just lovely. It really is.
Oh,
like
great.
it gets cool in the evenings and
That's nice.
And I mean there are some hot days, but nothing.
See, I would love to be able to go away for the summer months from here, but I would be like the circus is coming to town, right, with all of my animals. It's like, what is that caravan coming into town? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cecilia, I went to school in Rolla for 2.5 years, so I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we ready to roll? We doing it? Should we go?
I think we are.
Yeah? You got Twitter on? Are you recording? I forget all the checklists.
Yeah, I think I'm doing
Laps down.
all the things I'm meant to be doing.
Doing all the things.
Oh, wait, hang on. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Wait, just quickly. Gotta share my screen for the... there we go.
There we go.
All right.
There we go.
Now we're ready.
Now we're ready to go. All right. Let's see. 3, 2, 1. I don't want to do it the way Dave does it. I'll just be quiet for a minute. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Or good evening. Standard Trish greeting for everybody, which of course means Dave's not with us tonight. Welcome to the Silmarillion Film Project. We're still in season 5.
Yep.
I'll have you guys know. And we're in for a good time tonight. I think this is the last of this phase, right? The last episode of the phase we're in right now.
Maybe not. No, I think it's gonna be at least one more. Well, first of all, that it presumes we get through all of the things that we're supposed to talk about tonight, which is always a major assumption.
That's
but
right.
And I think there are some kind of larger thematic issues I want to come back and talk about too. So, but we're getting there. We're getting to the end of the.
So that mellifluous voice that you're hearing is Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor, and I am now going to mute myself because I have the fan on the background. So the fan will presage my coming in to make a comment.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are indeed coming towards the end, not quite at the end, but towards the end of our pre-season discussion of storylines, kind of working out some of the big picture planning for this season before we begin to go through the outlines of individual episodes and stuff. We're getting closer to that and excited to begin to really see this story that we've been discussing begin to take form in some more tangible ways. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Before that, just a couple quick announcements. First, we have another moot coming up soon. Middlemoot is happening this year. It is going to be an online event this year. We have decided we want to stick with that for the next couple moots here in the fall, just to make sure, to make things easier for everybody. But it does mean things are going to be available for lots of folks. We just did Mythmoot a couple weeks back at the beginning of August, and it was spectacular. We had such a wonderful time. It was a really excellent online moot experience. Our first attempt at a real online-only conference, which is only ever a poor substitute for an in-person event. We really value those very much. Of course, at Signum, we do everything online, and our moot rotation, our moots, our gatherings, both our big central gathering at Mythmoot and our regional gatherings after that, are designed to be the one chance that we have to actually get together and see folks. And I'm really eager to get back to that. But we can't yet. So while we can't, we might as well do the best we can getting together online. So we're going to be doing that again. The date is October 10th. The theme is the Heart of Hope, which is a lovely follow-up, actually, from Mythmoot, where we were defying and defining the darkness. And now we're looking at hope here in October of 2020. We're coming up on the call for papers deadline. You can find more information on this at signumuniversity.org/events, so that you can find links and things to send proposals to. Would love to see some more people involved there, and look for more information. I'll be talking a little bit more about Middlemoot as we get closer to it. Yeah, Steve, it is going to be okay. The regional events, I have no desire to, although again, I always look forward to getting together with folks from the region. We're not going to kick out anybody who's not, from the, center part of America there. So yeah, it'll definitely be something that folks in general can attend. Definitely. So people from outside of the Midwest, welcome also to submit proposals there. So it will be hosted from virtual Kansas City this year. Kansas City is supposed to be the location. It's going to be hard because it is particularly difficult for me, because I was really looking forward to going back to some of my favorite barbecue places in Kansas City this year. So that really goes to my heart. But we'll do what we can. The second thing I wanted to remind folks, as I've mentioned before, that the Signum store is now open. You can see the website there. You can get that link also from the Signum University website as well. Lots of fun stuff on the Signum store. I've been really enjoying my first round of Signum merchandise that I've gotten recently. I was just wearing a couple of my new T-shirts earlier this week. So anyway, definitely recommend that. Lots of fun things. And if you have ideas, as you'll see how this store works, of course, we have a number of designs and slogans and things like that. And then you can get them put on almost anything you want. You can choose almost any article of clothing or cups and coasters and throw pillows and socks and all manner, phone cases and almost anything you like. So anyone who has a suggestion for designs, feel free to let us know. We don't really have any film specific designs, which would be fun. But Nick says he couldn't talk his wife into a Balrogs Don't Have Wings sheet set. Yeah. I got the T-shirt, but yeah, I think the comforter would be a harder sell, but who knows? But yeah, so definitely. You know, I think some of the designs and things that we have. I think of the some of the wonderful artwork that's been done for some film. It would be really cool to be able to have some of that stuff in our store. Yeah, Bob Way was here, Phil. That is a definite potential, I think.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, yeah, a definite potential. So if you have suggestions, you know, you can send links to. So I mean, obviously, we'd have to, if it's you know, the artwork of someone else who submitted for Film, we'd obviously have to get their permission and stuff. But anyway, yeah, let us know suggestions that you have, and we'll definitely work on that. info@signumu.org is where you should send the suggestions and things for well, not just shirts, but any designs. Yeah, excellent. Cool. Oh, great. Yes. And as Marie was reminding me, there's a thread on the message board for ideas for designs. Great. Yeah. Marielle is suggesting Film production crew. That would actually be a really fun T-shirt, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there you go. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great. So anyway, definitely stuff to be thinking about as we move forward. Some fun opportunities. Yeah, Marie, exactly. We do have to be careful about things. You know, we have to be careful about trademarks and stuff. We can't really do any trademark stuff. So a lot of character names are out of bounds. Bob Way, of course, would be okay. But yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. All right. So good. Let's jump back into the story then. So let's look at the Sindar, all of whom really play a very small role in this season. Of course, you know, Doriath was the center of one of the primary storylines in last season, in season 4, with the discovery of the kinslaying. Círdan and Thingol, of course, being the key characters in that whole thing, and obviously Galadriel and Celeborn. The romance of Galadriel and Celeborn culminating in their wedding at the end was also another major storyline. So we had a lot of Sindar action in season 4, and the Sindar take very much a back seat here in this season. Not only because, you know, the action is sort of elsewhere, primarily focused on the men and then the other Noldor with whom they're primarily interacting, but of course also building up to the Dagor Bragollach, which is going to be affecting the Noldor who are forming the Leaguer and touching the Sindar all over a great deal less. So obviously we want to be preparing, you know, for the major stroke at the end of the season. However, we don't want to forget about our Sindar, so let's kind of think through ways in which they could be involved. So Galadriel and Celeborn, we had them honeymooning. We were gonna send them off to Osiriand, which does mean that they have the opportunity to interact with men. Of course, we have the famous unfriendship incident with men. We had decided that the people who will become the House of Hador should be the ones who have the unfriendly relationship with the Green Elves. So that kind of having Galadriel and Celeborn on hand during that dispute would be kind of interesting. I would think, by the way, one of the other obvious opportunities that we have here in season 5 with Galadriel and Celeborn in Osiriand, is a scene introducing them to Treebeard, right? Treebeard and Galadriel and Celeborn could meet for the first time here. Time for us to set up the meeting of Galadriel and Celeborn with Treebeard in Orthanc in The Return of the King, right? You know, when they meet for the last time there at the end. So that's certainly another possibility there. And then, of course, they can return to Doriath, which gives us an excuse to come back to Thingol for really the one the one incident in there's only one thing that Thingol has one job in this season, right? And that's to make his ominous and dramatically ironic declaration that no man shall ever come into Doriath, right? So, and of course we do have the interactions, we've already talked about the Haleth story and how Haleth is going to be interacting especially with Beleg. That's, it's sort of related there as well. So anyway, let's think about Galadriel and Celeborn first before we get to Thingol here. All right, so yeah, Marie, that's a really interesting question about the timing of the separation between the Ents and the Entwives. I'm thinking that's a Second Age story primarily, the separation. I mean, which kind of means that we should introduce the Ents and Entwives together at some point prior to that. I don't think we have a lot of plot line for Ents this season. I can't imagine Treebeard as more than a kind of a cameo role throughout, the entire season this year. Rhiannon is wondering if they should leave for the east before the Dagor Bragalach. Possibly. I don't know that they need to leave entirely. They just don't need to not be in the north, right? Or some of them could be. I mean, there's no reason that we can't have an end. I mean, Treebeard can't be, right? Treebeard can't die in the Dagor Bragalach. Dorthonion is one of the places he mentions in his song, in The Lord of the Rings, being. So it'd be kind of nice to put him there, actually. I said having Galadriel and Celeborn and Osirian gives us an opportunity to introduce them to Treebeard, and I still think that's true. But I don't think that we should make the Ents merely a feature of Osirian. Treebeard is pretty clear about the fact that he wandered all over Beleriand and quite enjoyed it. So showing them, having them sort of show up in various places. Again, not necessarily multiple times this season, but multiple times over the next few seasons. It seems to me something that we should probably do. Okay, wait, we had him visit Dorthonion last season? All right, I was forgetting that. When did Treebeard show up in Dorthonion last season? Did we have another role for him? I seem to be blanking on our Treebeard cameo last season. Oh, he's in the ending montage. No wonder I forgot. Okay. Right. That's a pretty minor appearance by Treebeard during the montage. Sure. Okay. Right. Yeah, Steve and I agree. We do need to be thinking about the timing of Galadriel and Celeborn's departure entirely from Doriath when they cross the mountains. Well, I'm not ready to think about that yet, but I agree. That's certainly something that we need to be that we need to be thinking about. Oh man. Nick is wanting us to set up a later fall for Galadriel. Perhaps one that explains the Rohirrim's fear of her, he says.
That's pretty interesting.
That is pretty interesting. At some point, we need to do a kind of big picture brainstorming about the trajectory that we're going to give to Galadriel's character, especially through the second and into the third ages. which is going to have to confront the very difficult question, which Tolkien never did completely retcon. Why is she not at the Battle of the Last Alliance? Of course, the answer to that is because the Last Alliance was invented before Galadriel was. But it's interesting to me even during his revision stages at the end of The Lord of the Rings, like during the stages in which he was going back and adding Arwen in, that he never went back and added Galadriel to the list of folks who was on Mount Doom, with Gil-galad and Elrond, for instance. But anyway, that's obviously a later concern, but again, it's part of the bigger picture. It's part of the bigger. We need a good, consistent story about Galadriel. Obviously, she's going to play an important role when we get to Celebrimbor and the Dwarves of Moria. But even just thinking about Galadriel at the end of the first stage, and her decision to remain in Middle-earth, and why she remains in Middle-earth, and what she does, and the whole, the business about maybe her not being invited back, and passing the test and the ban and all that kind of thing. So yeah, we do need to set that up. There, I mean, a lot of that stuff is our second age questions, obviously, Marie. Again, I'm just trying to think of, we will need to set up the broader trajectory of her character. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we need to think about that in this season. I mean, it's hard on the one hand because it's hard to just say, well, she's not in this season very much, so let's put that off until another season, because she's not going to be important in any other season. I mean, that is to say, there's no reason from the text why she should be important in anything else moving forward. She's an extremely minor character. She was only imperfectly or partially retconned back into the Silmarillion at all. And so there are a few references to her, but there's little more than this. Nick, I mean, I do agree we need to figure out where we're going with her character, or it's going to seem inconsistent. Yes. Okay, Nick, okay. So let's start off, first things first, by just thinking about relevance to this season. What's her relationship with men? What's her reaction when the men come in? If she's in Osirian, she's on the front lines, right? She's going to be among the first, not like very first. She's not Finrod. But of course, she's Finrod's sister. So if Finrod is encountering, Beor in Osirian, in the general area there, and he knows that his sister is around, he's going to talk to her, right? So I would think that Galadriel would, and then especially if we can, work in the unfriendship situation. Hang on a second. Let's go back one step. Can we think about the unfriendship situation? We've mentioned it, but how do we want to play that? How do we want to play the unfriendship on screen? Wherein does the conflict arise between the green elves and the men? We had the conflict between the dwarves and the green elves back in season 4. What are the similarities? What are the differences? The dwarves were emerging from the mountains, and they were, logging basically, and they were taking out parts of the forest. But I would think there's a significant difference between the men and the dwarves, right? I mean, differences which might go in a couple different ways. On the one hand, the dwarves were just like mining the forests as a resource. They just wanted wood, right? And yet they did have need of wood. And so they were cutting down trees and dragging them underground and using the lumber in their building projects and such. So the dwarves they weren't They weren't living there at all, right? With the men, it's a different situation. They can be destructive, but they're not just going to be like wiping out whole sections of forest for no reason. They might be settling, right? And if they're settling, they will be clearing forest for agricultural land, right? So, but again, it's going to be different. The men trying to, if they're traveling through, how are they offending the green elves? Is the problem that they're settling? Yeah, Rhiannon, if they're trying to settle and establish farms there in Osirian, they are going to want to be clearing parts of the countryside for their farms, and the elves, the green elves, would certainly not approve of that. How would we want to? How would we want to? How would we want to set it up? I was thinking that again, the House of Hador, that was my suggestion. And the reason I gave at the time why I didn't want the Haladin to be the ones who were the focus of the unfriendship of the Green Elves was that I wanted her, we were thinking of that as a setup for, we're discussing that explicitly in connection with Haleth's interaction with Caranthir. And what I wanted from that was I wanted to insist upon her discernment in her relationship with Caranthir. I want her to reject Caranthir's offer, not because she's just biased against elves because of the experience with the green elves and that, just as sort of an expression of a general distrust against elves, but rather as a piece of discernment on her part, just a personal distrust of Caranthir, that she is sufficiently insightful to basically say, yeah, no, I'm not down with this, serving this guy, right? I don't trust the situation and we want to be on our own. So that's why I was thinking it would be kind of cleaner if we have, if we didn't have that, and we've got the people who shall be the House of Hador are the largest group anyway, so it's easiest in many ways, I think, to make them be the ones encountering the green elves. And Mario, I agree, we don't want it to just look like a repeat of the dwarf green elf thing. Yes, that is also sort of a concern. And Maria, it does lead to the council. Thinking as we discussed the council, among the people who are imminently to become the House of Hador, one of the major, we had discussed three major kind of schools of thought among that people. The one Hador, of course, being the, hey, let's ally ourselves to the elves and join the fight and go north and join the fight. There were those who wanted to just bail, right, and say Beleriand actually kind of sucks, let's get out of here and go back over the mountains. And then we had the group of folks who were going to fight, right, who are interested in fighting, who are saying like, no, let's we can establish our own place. And so, Marie, that is the other reason why I really like having this group be the ones who are the sort of the focal point of the conflict with the Green Elves, because it's one of the things that they have had. They didn't strike first blood with the elves. They can easily see this as defending themselves, right? They came over the mountains and immediately got set upon. Why should they? Why shouldn't they fight back? Why shouldn't they establish their own place? Now, Rhiannon, I do remember that in the Silmarillion, the Green Elves don't attack the House of Hador's because there are too many, right? Because they're afraid of them. They attack the Haladin because there are fewer of them. This I'm not too worried about for a couple reasons. One, because I don't think one of the things that is going to characterize the third house, right, the larger third house, is a lack of cohesion prior to the council, right? That is one of the things that's going to lead to the council, I think, right? Is this desire on the part of the men to say, like, we need to decide what we're going to do, but we all agree on the fact that we need to get together and do it, right? We need to band together. We're, they're kind of coming over. They're not coming over they're not an army. They're not an army on the march. They're a large group of people, and they're fierce people. I mean, they do, have warriors and such. But they're primarily looking to settle. And I don't think they need be marching all in like one group, again, certainly not with an army per se, or as an army. So having them kind of spread out enough, besides which, it doesn't even have to be the whole force that gets like attacked, in detail by the Green Elves. It can be individual groups. I mean, we have them kind of settling through a whole large region there in Beleriand. So there can easily be those who move south into Ossyria and then find trouble with the Green Elves at that point. Exactly, outliers, Murray. That's just the thing. Yeah. Stephen is saying, might they think, Stephen Cover says, might they think that the elves are either tricked by Morgoth or even in league with him? Well, sure. I mean, putting ourselves into the mindset of these men who have crossed the mountains, right? They have lore. They're afraid of the shadow, right? They are looking for a place where the shadow does not extend, which of course is sort of the irony. They get to Beleriand and find, oh, this is where he lives, actually. So they know about the enemy and his servants. And what do they find? They come over here, and there's these, woodland things. They've, have they met orcs before? I think they probably have met orcs before. And now they're getting attacked by, arrows from the trees and stuff. Why shouldn't they assume that, those who are attacking them are, servants of the shadow, whom they have been, again, whose power and influence they have been fleeing? That seems to me perfectly logical. What is there to lead them to think otherwise? Yeah. Now, Florian, they have met the Avari, and yes, they have been friends with the Avari, but I can't think that would be universal, right? So, I mean, two things there. First of all, I don't think that their history with the Avari is universally friendly. Probably. I don't see any reason why it must be, that is to say. But secondly, even if they do recognize the Green Elves as elves, like the Avari that they've already known, that doesn't necessarily mean they assume they're friendly, right? They're a different people, right? And what do they know about them? Nick, yeah, there are definitely ways in which the elves could be much more terrifying than orcs to the strangers, right, who don't know any different. Good. Now, Michael says, how does Hodor go from unfriendship with the Green Elves to total alliance with the other elves? I don't think he does. And again, this is another advantage to having the House of Hodor. Again, these people, I guess we kind of need a thing to call them before they become the House of Hodor after the council. I'll just call them the third group for now. It's one other advantage of having this third people be not united, basically, be kind of scattered and decentralized. Some of them will have that experience with the Green Elves. Hodor himself does not have to be among them, right? And among those people. So that's not been his personal experience. And anyway, he's quite young when he heads off. The Estelators, right? So the campers, exactly, right? Fine, Nick, that's great. We'll call them the campers. Yeah, good. Um, yeah, see, what no, Stephen H. I don't see at all why it should weaken his character in any way. Again, there are different place, like, the campers, right? The campers are spread out among a wide different region. Many of them will have had different experiences. We know, I mean, we were talking about the different elves coming and introducing themselves and meeting the humans. So there's going to be some of the campers, all right, who have had very positive encounters with elves, which leads them, of course, then to have the young and adventurous youths among them go back among the elves and explore. They'll want to see the kingdoms of the elves for themselves, and they'll be really. I mean, surely they would be really impressed by, like, the arms and armor and the raiment and stuff of the elves. I mean, the elves are going to look really impressive to the humans, and those that come in and are friendly are going to make a really good impression, but not on all of them, right? There will be, so there will be, like, those of the campers who were down in the sort of the Osirian quarter, right, of the region where they're settled, will have had a much more fraught relationship with the elves than those who live, say, up in the north, right? Some will have encountered the Feanorians, and so they'll have some other, kind of reactions, right? Some of them might, I guess, some of them positive, some of them negative. So there's plenty of scope for a really wide array of experiences that, the campers as a whole are going to be having with the elves. So having Hador coming from one of those, one of those groups, one of those families, one of those, settlements, which has had really positive, which just happened to be visited by one of the really good elf lords, right? And invited off and stuff. So yeah, I think that's easy. Yeah, Florian, I agree with you. We need different believable perspectives for the council. Absolutely. All three of those perspectives that we're bringing to the council are perfectly viable perspectives, right? And it's easy to put ourselves, I think, in the mindset of the humans who have had these very different experiences, some of whom feel like these elves are nothing but trouble and we should declare war on them. I mean, it would be interesting, actually, right? Some of the men who have lived down and been dealing with the green elves and the problems with the green elves, they might never even have seen, like, one of the Feanorians in full armor, right? So, their whole impression of what it means to declare war on their neighbors is, to fight back against those largely unarmored, bow shooting elves who are kind of, hard to pin down and terrifying. But it seems like if you take the proper approach, you could probably fight them. Whereas those, again, who have gone and visited the Feanorians and stuff would come back and be like, no, let's not attack them. Let's not do this. It does not seem good odds on that particular that particular approach. So again, there's going to be very different kinds of perspectives that they're going to have, and it's very easy to have strongly held opinions with backing of large sectors of the people, and who then all come to the council and try to convince the others of their way of looking at things. So again, this is to me the fun opportunity for this third group of men, is we can you remember we've been wanting to think about what are the kinds of relationships, the kinds of attitudes towards elves, the different kind of relationships between elves and men that we can sort of highlight in the three different kindreds of the Edain here in the north. This one kind of gives us an opportunity to do everything, right? Like, all different perspectives are all kind of combined here. And the council then provides us the opportunity to kind of bring all of those together to a head and hear the sort of arguments in support for each of these different perspectives, right? And I would think, Marie, I could easily imagine, the council, like, beginning with an impassioned address by, one of the Osirian folks who has, had, like, his family killed by the green elves, and his, telling stories of the, the arrows that come flying in the night, and all these things that, not being able to being afraid to leave their house, and the sort of the terror and how they need to fight back and everything. And then again, people who know the Feanorians next door to say, like, when you say we should just attack you have no idea like what you're talking about. That would be such a bad idea to attack our neighbors in the north. And then this could be then fuel for like all of the different perspectives on this, not just perspectives on like whether or not we're pro-elf or anti-elf, but like whether or not there's even any odds, whether it makes any sense to attack their neighbors. And they can be trying to figure out, would they even, what is the relationship between the Feanorians and the Green Elves? They wouldn't even really know exactly what that is. But anyway, this would all be fuel to support the argument that says, you know what, let's just go, right? Let's just leave. That's it. But this is not we came here hoping to escape, right? We came here looking for a safer place to live. I think we've proven this ain't it, right? Whatever could be said for Beleriand, it's clearly not the land of peace and tranquility that we were looking for. So maybe the obvious and safest thing to do is for us to decamp back over the mountains, and make the best of the situation that we had over there. Good, Florian. Yeah, some will be disappointed that the light they sought is across the sea. Yes, I think that should definitely come up in the council. The whole light across the sea business. Have one of the wise among them. Remember, in the Athrobeth, we're told that it's the wise among this group who have the clearest lore of the older days. I know we were shifting Adenel to the people of Beor personally. Adenel personally into the Beor camp. But we can still have wise people among, the campers who are able to say that. And then, who are talking about the light. No, we need to seek the light in the west that their legends have told of. And then the elf friends among them can say, oh yeah, actually about that, right? We've talked to the elves and they say, no, it's over the sea, actually. Exactly, Florian. There certainly will be some who prefer to go back over the mountains to get away from Morgoth. Absolutely. Preferring, that going back to the much easier relationship in general. I think easier relationship that they had with the Ovari. Okay, so now I see that several of you are concerned about, Rhiannon, you're asking, do we really want to have elves killing men? Well, how would the unfriendship of the Green Elves be manifested? I don't think that the Green Elves show their unfriendship to the men just by looking shocked and sad, to quote Mary. I don't think they're peaceful at all. I think what the text is clearly suggesting is that they are going to resist them, that they consider them enemies. The warning that they are giving, it's like they go to Finrod. I don't think that they're just going to, like, on first sight start shooting the men, but are they willing to attack? Yeah, I definitely think that they are willing to attack. And if we are going to have some of the men settling in Osiriand, or attempting to settle in Osiriand and clear forest for farms and stuff like that, I think that we do follow the text in having the Green Elves first go intervene ask one of the other elf lords to intervene, like they do with Finrod, right, and say, get them to move on, or else, right? And it's pretty clear to me that the or else in the text is, or else we're going to start shooting them, right? So, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly, Marie. I also don't think that they'd have any qualms about killing humans. But I agree. They're not going to be just they're not going to shoot first and ask questions second. That I think is certainly something that we should show there. But yeah, I mean, so okay. Do we want one opportunity here? Well, coming back around to Galadriel and Celeborn here. What if we put Galadriel and Celeborn in Finrod's place as the ones that the Green Elves come to? This is especially logical if we have the spokesperson for the Green Elves be, oh darn it, I'm forgetting her name. What's her name? Galathiel? Galathiel, yeah, thank you. Galathiel, Celeborn's sister. The fact that she would come to her brother and Galadriel, I mean, it's simple enough, right? She knows, it will be known to the Green Elves that Finrod has befriended the House of Beor, right? So one of the Noldor established friendships with a group of men, and they passed through peacefully, right? And went on and he took them home, right, with him. And okay. And he was Galadriel's brother, and her brother's married to her. So, going to ask for their advice and help and say, well, hey, new sister-in-law Galadriel, your brother befriended these other men and they passed through peacefully and we didn't have any issues with them. I really don't. Again, when I come back to the unfriendship and I come back to thinking about what exactly is going to inspire the unfriendship of the Green Elves, I have a hard time imagining that the Green Elves are going to be moved to violence just by the men passing through Osiriand, unless they are extremely destructive in the course of merely passing through, right? Unless they're like burning a road through Osiriand or something like that. I could see if there are enough of them and they're moving slowly enough that they're like depopulating the beasts in the forest with their hunting to feed themselves as they go through. That I think would be an issue for the Green Elves. But again, mostly I don't think they wouldn't have a problem with groups of men passing through. Where the problem would come in would be if they want to settle, not necessarily because they hate having them as neighbors. I don't think that we want to depict the Green Elves as being merely xenophobic here. But again, the whole stripping of the forest and clearing it for agriculture is the thing that they would certainly not approve of. Yeah, Rhiannon says, could they perceive that men are corrupted by Morgoth? I wonder. Well, or could they think that they are? Look, I mean, the initial impression, remember Finrod's first thought when he came across the humans was that they were some kind of orc, right? So that they would be mistaken for orcs or for some other servants of the enemy would be understandable. But Finrod is there to prevent that, right? And as far as the whole issue about the corruption by Morgoth, they're not corrupted by Morgoth. That's not exactly right. there is a darkness on them, but the darkness, Morgoth had a hand in it, but he didn't. There's no parallel, for instance, to what he did with the orcs, for instance, right? He didn't. Yeah, they're not exactly corrupted. They're not exactly corrupted. Yeah. Yeah, Philip, I certainly agree. The humans could be forgiven for thinking nobody lives here, right? Because they don't see any buildings, right? They don't say it. This looks like, you know, unsettled land to them, and it, in a sense, would be unsettled land. And then they discover that the elves live there already, and that would be awkward. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, Charlie, and you're right. Many of the early men veered away from Morgoth's darkness, and remember, that's these people, right? The Edain are here because they have been fleeing from the shadow of Morgoth, right? This group of people are here because they are the ones, in a sense, who are least corrupted by Morgoth. Now, we've already set the stage for when we've talked about what Morgoth did out in the east and how he has established, how he already began to establish, you know, the worship of himself and things, and some corrupt religions and things like that, which are going to be coming into play all the way through down into the Third Age, right? Sauron still kind of building on the foundations of those things. But again, those who came in, who made it into Beleriand, are those who want out, those who want nothing to do. There are going to be out in the Far East, certainly Far East from the Beleriandic standpoint, in the Far East and South, lands where there are many men who do still worship Morgoth. But this is not them. That's why they're here, because this is not them. Yeah. Now, Florian, absolutely. They're still fallen, right? They still have this shadow. They're still mortal. But yeah, so I don't think that there shouldn't be an issue of them like sort of bearing a specifically Morgothian taint. We'll come back to this. We're going to come back to this in a couple weeks. At least 2, possibly 4 weeks, because when we talk about sort of the themes, the larger themes, the elf and human issues, this is one of the things I want to come back to and talk about, the whole mortality question and the assessment of the whole mortality question. Anyway, so we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more later, but. Yeah, Cecilia says, what about battle between 2 factions of the campers? Some want to stay and some want to move on, and the Green Elves see this, and the kinstrife angers and disquiets them. That is interesting, and it certainly could help to convince them that these people are like no good, right? And that like trying to become their friends is a losing gambit, right? Look at how they treat each other. Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't want to have too much. I don't think we want to have like something like civil war among them, like big conflicts between factions within them, mostly because that's just complicated, and I don't know that we want to go that far. But we could have some acts of violence among them. I mean, yeah, exactly, Rhiannon. A fight, a fight breaks out in which several people die, and the Green Elves would just have to see that and be like, what are these creatures? I mean, that doesn't really happen among the Green Elves themselves. So they could draw some conclusions from that. So ideally, it seems to me that when we're thinking about the unfriendship, ideally we want the Green Elves to be drawing conclusions which are at least logical. Right. So it makes sense that they would think this. And ideally, have them be not wrong, right? They don't have to be completely in error about the men. Uh, I don't think we want to depict the green elves again. Certainly not as Florian, as you say, just sort of racist for abstract reasons. Yes, I agree. We don't want to. As I said, we don't want to depict them as merely xenophobic. These are strangers, and even though we could justify that with their history with the dwarves, right, and have some among the green elves be saying like, "See, look, this just shows." Weird looking people coming out of or across the mountains. You can't trust them. They're all no good. Right. So, I have an idea. Let's just start shooting them as soon as we see them. I'm not saying that you couldn't make a consistent story out of them, but I don't like that story. I don't want to sort of do that, to the green elves. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, Stephen, no, we don't want to have things escalating in civil strife among the humans till they get to a Tower of Cirith Ungol situation. No, that would be awkward, certainly. Exactly, Florian is suggesting that this could lead to just a strong reaction against anyone with facial hair. Yes, exactly. I don't think we want to go there. I don't think we want to do that. But okay. So from the green elves' perspectives, they see the humans coming through. My thought is that their first reaction is dismay, and fear. They're afraid because they're afraid that they're orcs, right? They're afraid that there are some other servants of the enemy invading their forest from over the mountains. That's a perfectly logical conclusion on their part. Right. They would see Finrod and they would see Finrod befriending them and Finrod taking the House of Beor away. And they would be like, okay, fine. So they're not orcs, right? They're not orcs. Finrod convinces them that they're not orcs, but they're still going to be uncomfortable. And then when the campers show up, the green elves are gonna probably, I would think that they would start with the they would start with the initial thought like, okay, we'll let them pass through, right? They're not orcs, so I guess they're okay, but they'll observe them, and they will be disquieted. They will be uncomfortable for a lot of reasons. One could be, Cecilia, as you say, like they could see a fight. They could see, or what if they do capital punishment? What if there's what if somebody gets hanged or crucified or something, right? I mean, like, what if they just have a really harsh legal code, and somebody is caught doing something bad and is hanged and left to hang or crucified or has or like impaled. I don't know, like what if just some kind of to the elves sort of really brutal form of capital punishment, right? And they come across like the corpse of this person who is left like hanging there by his own people, and they're like, dang, like what is wrong with these people? And they would be disquieted, right? Also, again, I would think that there would be a concern. The resources of many of their friends, the beasts, would be being hunted. The elves themselves are hunters. They're not, they're not vegetarians necessarily. But again, there would be a different attitude, right? There would be some wholesale hunting, which would be uncomfortable to them. The environment would be, we can show places where they, the men have left a kind of trail of destruction, a trail of destruction in their paths, which again to the elves would be inexplicable. Even like, they settle in a place for a while, right? Like a season or like a winter or something like that. They're not even necessarily a winter, but like there would be like stuff cut down and burned, and even just like one of the campsites where they stayed, and they've wrecked the place. Like there's this whole field and thicket that have just been leveled by them when they just stayed the night there. And the green elves would be asking each other like, what peoples, like relate to the land this way, right? How could they do that? Marie, exactly. That's why I was suggesting execution, capital punishment, because I would think that they would think that any kind of capital punishment was quite brutal. That is not something that they do. Yeah. Or beheading, Stephen. Absolutely. They could behead them, and they don't even have to put their heads on spikes necessarily. I don't know, but yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, Stephen H says, unless you're Turgan, yes. That, of course, is an interesting thing, right? And Stephen, you bring up a fantastic point, which I think is a really good reason to use this as a subplot, right? If we show an elvish distaste for the idea of capital punishment, right, it does set up the capital punishment of Eol really interestingly, right? That's not going to happen until near the end of the season. And one of the things that we wanted to accomplish in this season was some red flags for Turgan, right? Now, I don't think that the execution of Eol is a bad, horrible, wrong thing, right? But again, I just think that could be interesting as a kind of, I think we could play that as a red flag in some fairly interesting ways. Yeah. I don't know, Philip. I don't know. Philip is saying these are the forefathers of the Numenorians, among whom murder was unknown until the latter days. Is it though? Here now? I'm not sure. I mean, murder can be, relatively unknown in Numenor until the latter days, but that's different. Yeah, Florian says Brondir disagrees. Exactly, right. Yeah, no, I think we have lots of reasons to think, even without the Easterlings, Broda and the other Easterlings, even without them, there's plenty of reason to think that. I mean, think of the outlaws that Turin takes up with. And I agree, Rhiannon, that execution is not the same as murder. In fact, again, from the human's perspective, their strict and unforgiving moral, a legal code is one of the things that separates them, right? They are not, they don't just allow anything to go, right? They have a very strict moral code. And one of the ways in which they express this is this sort of, there are some things for which they have a zero tolerance policy. I mean, that, again, I think it's an interesting opportunity for us to show different perspectives, right? Again, ideally, we don't want the men to look horrible, and we don't want the green elves to look horrible either, right? We want both of their perspectives to be understandable. So if from the human perspective, we have them being uncompromising with something horrible, like maybe the person who is executed was like a rapist or something like that, right? So if somebody commits rape, remember that's an issue. That's an issue with the outlaws that Turin takes up with, right? They're known for that, for capturing, young women who are out on their own. That's what Turin in the Children of Húrin and in the Book of Lost, or not the Book of Lost Tales, sorry, I mean Unfinished Tales version of the Narn, Turin prevents a rape, right? From those. So anyway, and Nick agreed. That's another thing that's unheard of among the elves, right? But again, so among the humans, right? They're just like, there's somebody who commits a horrible crime, say rape, right? And they execute justice upon him, right? because they're a good society, right? And they have no tolerance with that kind of behavior. And they live in a hard world, right? The hard world that they have lived in their travels. And so they string him up or whatever, they hang him, and they leave his corpse there in shame, right? Because like they are heaping shame upon those who commit such horrible crimes. So we can even show the people who do this, like the magistrate who, condemns them, however their judicial process is going to work, as very upright, right? Very admirable, very noble. And he is sentenced, and then the green elves come, but all the green elves see is them, killing and stringing up the body and leaving the body of one of their own. And yes, Marie, as you say, on the road, as they don't have jails, like prison, not really an option. So yeah, I mean, it makes all kinds of sense that they would have that kind of legal code. But again, to the green elves from the outside, they don't understand. Right. Apart from the fact that, Nick, as you say, they don't have rape either. But again, they wouldn't hear the deliberations, nor would they understand it if they did hear it. Right. They don't even know the language. So they would just see the execution and would be horrified. Right. And they would see the corpse hanging there and they would be astounded at the brutality of these people. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting. Well, no, Stephen, elves are unfamiliar with rape. Yes, we're going to get something like that with Celegorm. Yes, we are going to get something like that with Celegorm, with Luthien later on. But that doesn't make that... That's one of the reasons why that moment is really important, because it is one of the extremely few examples of this. Tolkien was pretty firm on that. Mariel, that's exactly what I'm thinking, that the green elves only see the hanging corpse. Like when the campers leave, right? When the campers decamp and move on, they leave behind this corpse hanging in a tree. And the green elves would just... Yeah, I mean, holy cow, that would be horrible. So there are lots of reasons why the green elves would be uncomfortable with them, right? But my thought here is, again, that the way that this goes, so they've learned from Finrod, they're not orcs. And they're willing to give the campers the benefit of the doubt when they come across the mountains, right? They don't attack them or anything. I don't think that they would approach them because they're pretty shy, the green elves, right? They kind of want to keep to themselves. So I think that they would kind of hide from them, as is described in the text. But they would watch. They would definitely watch, right, as the campers come through. And we could show them being uncomfortable and increasingly uncomfortable as time went on. The execution thing, I think, would be a really neat little plot point. Also, we would show the destruction. I mean, we could wrap that all into one. Cecilia, that's really interesting. Cecilia's thinking that the hanging corpse could look. I mean, as they're trying to understand that, right? Like, what is? Cecilia's thinking that some of the green elves could think that the hanging corpse is like a sacrifice to Morgoth. Like, is not this how his creatures would behave? Was this a human sacrifice, essentially? Maybe they would. So I would think, actually, in this one moment, we could squeeze all of the discomfort of the green elves, with the campers into one spot. Like, that is, they've moved on from a campsite and they come to their campsite, and the first thing they're doing is they're looking around and they're just seeing the destruction, right? No group of elves on the march would ever do that, would ever just clear stuff and burn stuff and leave this wound on the countryside where they were, right? And you could have the green elves talking about how it's going to take years of the sun before this glade will once again be free and clean and joyful as it once was. and then they'll find the corpse, right? Then they'll find the hanged corpse, and you know, be the more uncertain about this. Marielle, it is possible Marielle's thinking if we wanted to go the sacrifice angle, perhaps have the corpse be burned, and so that they find the charred bones. But I wouldn't want it to be mistaken for a normal funerary rite, which of course we could also show a normal funerary rite, which the elves would not understand, because they wouldn't understand about the whole mortality issue. But yeah, I mean, especially, yeah, it could be burned at the stake, but I don't know. I kind of like the hanging corpse, just for them to find a fresh, or possibly not 100% fresh corpse, still hanging in the tree. And this would be all manner of repulsive to them. Yeah, I kind of like the hanging thing, but I could be talked into, you know, a burning at the stake or something like that. But again, we don't want to make the people look overly cruel. I think hanging seems a comparatively clean. That they should have a strong moral code seems to me a good thing, since they are a good people. That they would do capital punishment seems to me inescapable under the circumstances. If they're going to have a strong moral code, it's going to have teeth. And what other teeth can they get? Again, as Marie said, they don't have jails, right? They can't do that. So, yeah. And yes, hanging corpses would send a strong message, yes, to the rest of the people. Absolutely. Yeah, good. Stephen Cover says one of the reasons hanging stuck around so long is precisely because it was considered more humane than many other execution styles. Yes, exactly. So we give them a relatively humane hanging, form of execution. But again, from a green elf perspective, seeing a beginning to decompose corpse swinging from a tree would not look merciful at all. They would not get the impression of a stern but moral people from that. Anyway, so so in one scene we could get the elves disquiet, right? Their discomfort with them. But I would think that still their conclusions would be, as long as they go, right? We don't want to, Finrod was probably right. Like, I'm sure it's okay. But this is, we just don't want them living here. And so as long as they continue to move, they're okay. The real unfriendship would then begin when some of them start to settle. Down. Now, Nick, I remember you were saying earlier on that the campers don't necessarily strike you as agricultural. So you were thinking of them being more herders instead of farmers? Maybe. I mean, I could honestly, I could see some of both. But in any case, herders also prefer open country, right? Marie, I certainly agree that while on the move, they had to be doing more hunting and herding than farming, certainly. I'm sort of imagining them settling down to become farmers when they do settle down. And by the way, this could be one of the things, one of the ways in which some of the elves show friendship to the humans, right? Those among the campers who have had good experiences with elves, some of the good experiences that they could have been, elves who came along and taught them agricultural techniques, helped them to learn to grow things. Yeah, Florian was just thinking the same thing. Them learning agriculture from the Noldor. Sure, why not? So, real tension would begin with the green elves if they were going to settle down. If we wanted to avoid armed conflict entirely, if we do not want any elves, any of the green elves actually attacking the men, at least not in force. And I agree, I don't think we want a battle or anything like that. Certainly not with like the main body or that sort of thing. I would think that they would see them coming through and they would be worried. So when Galatha would come to Galadriel and Celeborn would be as they are passing through and they're beginning to settle down in various places, and Galatha would come to them and say, look, we're concerned. We have these new neighbors, right? And we have concerns. We have concerns about the new neighbors, right? And some of them are wanting to move back to the forest, near the under the eaves of the forest, in the forests, and she would then give to Galadriel and Celeborn the kind of ultimatum that the Green Elves deliver to Finrod in the text, right? Like that we are. She can then deliver to them the "we are their unfriends" line, right? And what she would be advising to Galadriel and Celeborn is to say, look, if we would value your help, you too. I mean, Ms. Noldorin's sister-in-law here, you have connections with the other Noldor, some of whom have established relationships with some of these people. Could you intervene with them and ask them not to live in Osirian, because if they do, she could say, if they remain here, if they try to occupy our forest, there's going to be bloodshed, and it's going to get bad. Yeah. Now, what would Galadriel's perspective be? What's Galadriel's attitude to men? What do we think about that? We don't need to decide Galadriel's entire trajectory, but what's the next step for her character? The first step. So we had Galadriel, we had ambitious Galadriel, right? Galadriel, who was setting out, who was kind of inspired by Feanor's speech, but was sort of almost more in rivalry with Feanor, who was in closer rivalry with Fingolfin, who sort of fancied herself as a potential leader among the Noldor, one who was setting up to establish, to carve out a niche for herself, a niche of influence for herself among the other Noldor by, appointing herself, essentially getting herself appointed the first ambassador to the Sindar. But then we saw that kind of collapsing under her own emotional crisis during season 4. And then her long recovery from that with the help of Celeborn, which culminates in their marriage. I agree, Marie. She has to go back to wanting a realm of her own at some point. I don't think she's left that entirely. Interesting. Yeah, Margaret and Stephen Cover are both thinking she could be having some flashbacks to the kinslaying, especially when she hears the strung up corpse story. That was going to look like kinslaying to her. To all the elves, it would look like kinslaying. Florian is suggesting that we should have Galadriel start off with a general anti-man perspective, and have some development in that regard throughout the next seasons. Yeah. Question: do we want Galadriel involved? When do we want her to leave Beleriand? Or to make this... We could choose, if we wanted to, we could choose to have Galadriel out of Beleriand entirely. I like the idea of having her leave before the sack of Doriath. Yes, after Luthien's death, real, final death, second death. That makes sense to me in several ways. But I am real loath to have Galadriel pass out of our story for many seasons, which she would. I mean, unless we're going to be starting to introduce a Meanwhile an Eriador subplot of our seasons, you know, in that time. And that seems to me challenging. Yeah. On the one hand, Galadriel, two of our main characters are going to vanish soon, right? Like within the next couple seasons are going to vanish from, at least they vanish from the Silmarillion storyline, right? And that's Galadriel and Sauron both, right? You know, they pretty much vanish off the Silmarillion scene. I'm awful reluctant to be without either Sauron or Galadriel for, 5 years or something like that. Yeah. Well, anyway, we don't have to decide that tonight. Obviously, that's not a season 5 question in particular. But I certainly agree that Galadriel and Celeborn should at least be around long enough. It seems to me that the earliest at which we would want them to leave Beleriand would be, as Florian was suggesting, after Luthien dies for the second time. She should be around for the end of the Luthien story. I think for Galadriel and Celeborn to know Beren and Luthien in Osiriand, that seems to me very sensible, and one certainly logical springing off point for them to go from there over the mountains, right? Okay, so definitely that's the earliest point at which they could leave. So we have a little bit of time anyway before we get there. That's a season 6 or possibly a season 7 question. But the reason I wanted to think about that is I wanted to think, I was prompted about this, Florian, by your earlier comment about her starting off not liking men and then having development over the next few seasons. My question is, well, how many seasons do we have of her there? Because really, it's going to be about Beren in particular, right? Yeah. Hmm. Going back to Galadriel's overall perspective, and by the way, don't think I am not unaware of the fact that it's kind of ironic that I said we've just got to polish up a few minor characters tonight, and then our very first minor character we've spent already hours talking about. But that's because our first minor character is Galadriel, one of the biggest, most important characters in the entire series, right? This is a big deal. I know. Besides which, again, I wanted to work out the Green Elves situation. We kind of waved our hands at that before, and I think it's fine. Exactly, Stephen. She's the most major minor character, definitely. Okay. Galadriel's. She wanted to rule of her. What if? Okay, ruling a realm of her own. We talked about her returning to that. What if she's only just now really starting with that? That is to say, before we saw her being ambitious among the Noldor, right? One of the ways in which she can have changed since the very beginning of season the end of season 3 or in season 3 and the beginning of season 4, is that she's no longer trying to set herself up in a leadership role among the Noldor. She has no more ambitions of that at all. But she would not at all have given up any ambition of having a rule of her own, ruling a kingdom of her own. And in fact, her time in Doriath could have given her a clearer vision of that, right? That now she's no longer a rival of Fingolfin, right? She doesn't, she's not trying to take over from her uncle or one up her uncle anymore. She's not even really trying to establish herself as preeminent in any way among her kin. Her new, which will feel to her modest, right, ambition would be to establish a realm like Doriath, right, and to rule like Melian, essentially, to set herself up as a mini Melian in a new kingdom of her own. Yeah. Yes. I don't think she's not there yet. I mean, that she's not going to be trying to establish a realm. She's not at any point going to try to establish. Let me finish my sentence and then I'll disagree with myself because I just had a second thought there. I was going to say she is not at any point going to be trying to establish a realm of her own in Beleriand. But then he pauses and thinks to himself, what about Assyrian? What if that is an idea that grows slowly? The Green Elves have no king, right? They have no ruler since Denethor died. What if this moment when Galadriel comes to Galadriel and Celeborn becomes sort of the first moment where she gets the seed planted of like, maybe they need some benevolent guidance here in Assyrian. Maybe this is... I don't see this as a hostile takeover. I don't think that she's going to be, being like, congratulations, I'm your queen now. It's something that I'm not saying we want to change the story to establish the realm of Galadriel. But what if she has a notion? What if her relationship with the Green Elves develops in this way? I mean, just think, for one thing, this is a really close parallel, right? I mean, the Lothlorien is going to be her ruling a nation of Green Elves, right? I mean, like, that's going to be a thing with her. I could even imagine when she does finally decamp and go across the mountains into Eriador, that some of the Green Elves come with her, right? That some of the Galathrim, some of those who are here in Osirian could be future Galathrim, potentially. Again, I'm not wanting to do anything radical. I'm not introducing like a major political dimension here. What I'm thinking of is the evolution of her character and like what she does. Nick, that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm thinking of. Nick says if they keep coming to Galadriel and Celeborn with their problems, she's got to start feeling like that's where this is going, right? Yeah, I mean, she could see the need for guidance, that she has wisdom to offer, which they would appreciate. She's not like forcing herself upon them. This is not a usurpation on her part. She would see this as an opportunity to help them, right? And she would love Osirian itself. Like, I think that she would kind of love the place, and she could have a good relationship with the Green Elves. I mean, the first thing we could establish in this season is, we've got the in-law thing, right, with Galadriel and Galadriel. They're getting to know each other in this season during the honeymoon, right? Because that's what everybody wants on their honeymoon, to go live with their in-laws. But anyway, right? Uh, I think that Galathiel would have a great deal of respect for Galadriel. And the other green elves would, I mean, why not? They would really like her. Nick, exactly. She can help them to maintain the status quo, which the men threaten. Um, yes, yes. Um, yeah, I'm kind of liking this idea. Setting, at the very least, we can show her relationship with the green elves of Osiriand paves the way for what is going to happen later on, right? Later, when she leaves and goes east and establishes her new realm, those who love her most, those who admire her most, those who want to follow her and who do basically accept her as their liege, or as their lord, um, they're going to be the ones who go with her, obviously, right? And they're going to be the core of the Galathrim, the culture of the Galathrim that's going to be, right? Um, yeah. Um, yeah, Stephen Cover says she's establishing a cult of personality. Kinda. Kinda. Um, yeah. Yeah. Kinda. Anyway, so yeah, I kind of like this. I kind of like putting Galadriel in this position. So her relationship with the men, therefore, would be a green elf oriented position, right? She is on the side of the green elves against the men. And there is much that she would dislike about them. But at the same time, she's no fool, right? She's not going to be dumb about them. I think that she would be the one who would perceive. So she would understand. I would think that she would be the one who would comprehend, who would figure out um, the hanging, for instance, right? She would be the one who could go back and explain to Galathiel and others of the Green Elves, yeah, they're not, this was not a pagan sacrifice, actually, right? Kind of looks like that. I know this is really appalling to us, but actually, no, this is a, believe it or not, this is a kind of a sign that they're good guys, actually. But of course, the Green Elves would then be like, well, then, like, why are they raping each other and stuff? And she'd be like, fair point. Again, they would all be, she would be on their side in not really admiring them. Um, but again, I don't think, I think that, having her be the one to kind of come to understand this. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, Nick says that there does seem to be at least some level of Galadriel worship amongst the Galothrim. Not even sure why I've always felt that. Yeah, I mean, look, we one of the most recurring political dynamics in Tolkien's world is member of superior society goes among an inferior society and is accepted as their lord. That happens a lot, right? Whether you're the Númenóreans in Gondor, or you're Galadriel in Lothlorien, or you're Orifer and Thranduil in Mirkwood, or I mean, this happens. This happens a lot in Tolkien's world, and let's face it, this is one of the political dynamics that's really uncomfortable to modern people. Like, that's going to be hard. Um, it's going to be hard to show that kind of thing without its being uncomfortable. And to some extent, I don't want to hide from the discomfort of that. Um, I also don't want, I think there are ways to, one can characterize that as a mere kind of imperial, can oversimplify that as a kind of imperialism, which I think is not really true to what's going on in the text. I definitely do feel a strong impulse to resist a sort of simplified condemnation of that whole dynamic. Um, uh, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, exactly, Marie. It has very uncomfortable imperialist associations, right? Um, but uh, okay, so Yeah, Nick, I agree. I am also okay with making the audience uncomfortable with what Galadriel does between now and the Lord of the Rings. Absolutely, absolutely. I always have in mind playing the long game on her rejection of the ring. Right? I mean, that's we're building up to that. Right? That moment with Frodo is gonna be incredible when we finally get there, right? It's going to be the culmination of a long, long story. Um, but anyway, so yeah. Okay, so anyway, like I said, I bring this up not because I want to talk about all the imperialism stuff right now, or kind of deal with all of those different cultures and stuff. It's slightly tangential to it, but again, as I say, we have an opportunity here to begin to sort of show that. And if it just, there's no reason it can't begin in friendship. But, but Nick, I also am totally fine with people being uncomfortable with Galadriel. There's a lot to be uncomfortable about with Galadriel. She is always someone who could become that dark queen that she describes in her speech, right, to Frodo. That's always a possibility. And there should be moments in her story when it looks like she's this far from that, right? Um, so not yet, not yet. Uh, but we begin setting that up. So yes, having her, establishing them in Osirian, having her begin to show her usefulness, to show her wisdom among, and have her wisdom and insight respected by the Green Elves, but also have her accepted not just as an outsider, right, but have her sort of embraced by the Green Elves. Her and Celeborn both embraced by the Green Elves. And I agree, Cecilia, Celeborn is not just a silent sidekick. We're resisting Celeborn as silent sidekick, and here I've been talking about Galadriel as if she's a totally independent operator, and she's not. But I think there's also no question that she's the one who takes the lead, right, in these things. It's not. It's gonna be Galadriel and not Celeborn that the Green Elves are going to, or at least many of the Green Elves are going to be kind of gathering around, right? Um, uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, good. Exactly. Nick says the five people watching the show who are unfamiliar with the Lord of the Rings should be really tense about that scene with Frodo. Absolutely. Absolutely. They totally should. Okay. So, yeah. But see, here's the thing. Here's my sort of, I don't know if it's a solution, but here's my thought about that, Cecilia, about Celeborn's character. In my mind, here is the key. The key to making Celeborn's character consistent with the story of Galadriel and Celeborn as we get it in The Lord of the Rings and in Unfinished Tales, and yet not having Celeborn just be a cipher. We've already taken the first steps, right? Celeborn distinguished himself by his devotion to Galadriel, right? By his empathy for Galadriel. In other words, like being Galadriel's support structure, right, is kind of where he established his character during season 4. That's how that's what he made a name for himself for, right? And he put that above in a spectacular scene, right, and towards the end of the season, he put that above. He put being Galadriel's support system above even his friendship with Thingol, right, which led to strife temporarily. So I see, moving forward, I see Celeborn not as just, as you say, Cecilia, the silent sidekick, not just somebody who just kind of trails along silently behind Galadriel all the time, but somebody whose primary focus is still on supporting her, who I think that he sees her as a leader. He does defer to her. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, and so here, I think again, what we should show, what Celeborn's role should be, should be helping Galadriel's relationship with the Green Elves and helping them to accept her, right? Helping them to, because they might feel a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, obviously they're okay talking to Finrod, right? They don't distrust Finrod, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want him to move in, right? That they accept him, in that whole, in their world, in their realm, and he would help again through his, with his, and so his sister Galadriel is really, she's been since the death of Denethor, our, sort of spokesperson green elf, right? Do we need other green elf characters? I mean, like named green elf characters, like other major roles. Do we need other speaking roles for green elf characters? We probably will want some minor characters, I suppose, but yeah. Michael says, yeah, in a way, it's just the inverse, of the old sort of sexist saying, "There's a strong woman behind every strong man." Yeah, it is. That's kind of exactly the role I see for Celeborn, really. But anyway, yeah, I don't think we need any. I don't think there are really, really important personalities that we need among the other green elves yet. Anyway, yeah, we'll have speaking roles, but again, I don't see necessarily another character per se. Like again, like another personality among the green elves that we really have to bring forward here, especially since certainly for now, for these initial stages of this relationship that we're starting here in this season, we can begin by having the relationship between Galadriel and Galathiel can be the thing which kind of stands for her acceptance among the Green Elves. Because it would be natural enough if we show Galathiel accepting her and profiting from her advice and appreciating her help. That sets us up so that the next time in season 6, when we see Galadriel among the Green Elves of Osiriand, we can see her like being generally accepted, right, and having an accepted position within their society. That would seem like a very natural leap from the acceptance by Galathiel there. Yeah. Yes, and sorry, somebody else, what Stephen H. was talking about this too, Marie. Both Stephen H. and Marie are saying, we do have to remember, Galathiel is going to end up in Mirkwood, not in Lothlorien, right? She is not going to remain one of Galadriel's satellites for the rest of, her long life, right? So there will be a falling out at some point. There will be a point at which Galathiel is going to remove herself from both Galadriel and her own brother, Celeborn, right? Yeah, but that could be any time between now and, goodness, that could be related to the War of the Last Alliance, for crying out loud, right? So that could come substantially later. We'll see. I have a kind of inkling that Orifer might play a role there. That's one of the reasons I was thinking about the Last Alliance. Let's wait until we get Orifer involved, and I think maybe things might start to become a little bit clearer there. I don't even necessarily, by the way, I don't think it's unavoidable to have the ending, Galathiel ending up in Mirkwood as necessarily being the result of a bad thing. I don't think that she and Galadriel have to have a spat, like a real permanent falling out. It could be a positive choice on Galathiel's side. Yeah, again, I'm thinking about some kind of relationship, not necessarily a romantic relationship, but some kind of relationship between her and Orifer, which would lead her to join, to get a branch off from her brother and sister-in-law and join to the future. Because those are going to be the two major, elf groups, right? Three. I'm accepting the remnants of the Noldor, the Gil-galad faction. Gil-galad rules those who are the linear descendants of the rest of Beleriand, but the other elves. Obviously, we've got the elves of Mirkwood and the elves of Lothlorien. Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, Cecilia is wondering if, Celeborn's sister is this sort of prominent member of the Green Elves. Why do the Green Elves not gravitate to him? Uh, because Galadriel is kind of my answer to that, right? Uh, he doesn't, he's not a leader. I mean, honestly, that could be another, yeah, because Galadriel's obviously awesome. I think Celeborn is an introvert, for one thing, right? I mean, and it's not that I want to say like the difference between Galadriel and Celeborn is that he's an introvert and she's an extrovert, but that's one of them, right? He does not want to, he has no ambition to be a leader. So yeah, I think that he, again, he doesn't have to be weak. As goodness knows, would be very far from saying that like introversion correlates with just weakness of character, right? Not at all. But he doesn't put himself forward. That I think should be, is, still, exactly. He's a wise counselor, Nick. That's his role. He was a wise counselor. He was this rock solid support for Thingol. Thingol relied on him, right? Now Galadriel is going to be relying on him. And this is going to be why she is going to be saying, with no trace of irony in her voice, Lord Celeborn is wise and the giver of, and a great giver of gifts. That's, yes, she appreciates his wisdom. And others will too. But he's never going to be the rallying cry. He's never going to be the one that people gather around. That's just not him. So back to the question of Galadriel and men, because we got to wrap up here soon, having finished half of one slide, but I no regrets. This has been fantastic. Galadriel, I don't think we need to drive her to one pole or the other. Like, she doesn't have to be a Finrod-like supporter of men. She doesn't have to be like embracing Finrod's big picture. Oh, men are awesome. By all means, let's bring them in. Nor does she have to be Thingol, no men, please. I want nothing to do with them. She can be kind of in the middle there. She can be, disturbed by them, right? She will see quite truthfully, quite accurately, the great potential for evil in them. She will see they could go wrong very easily, right? Our relations with them could go bad very easily. But at the same time, this could be a really good thing, right? There's also, she would, again, I kind of like the idea of her investigating, essentially. She and Celeborn investigate the whole dangling corpse thing and learn about them. And discover that, okay, so good news is they're not as bad as you were afraid of. But you're also kind of not wrong. It would be best for them. And so she could then go to, they can then go to the men, Galadriel and Celeborn can then go to the men and say, look, we like you. We appreciate you. But don't come to us here. It's going to be bad if you do. There's going to be, in order to prevent strife and misunderstanding, it would really be best if you did not settle here. Yeah, exactly. Marielle says, the good news is they have a sense of justice. The bad news is they need harsh penalties in order to enforce that sense of justice. Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of a good news, bad news situation. So Yeah. That I would think would be her. And so she would end up just kind of, and not exactly neutral exactly, but undecided, open-minded in both directions, not falling all over herself to try to make a close ally of the elves, not going to live among them, and trying to guide and befriend them. Interesting that she doesn't, actually. Does that occur to her? Does she reject that, actually? Does it just not occur? Not sure. But anyway, but at the same time, she doesn't, she's not anti-human either. And I think that she could, when they would go back and visit Doriath, and she would encounter Thingol and Melian with, she would know about Thingol's ban, right? And I would think that Galadriel would disapprove, that she would think that that was bad policy on Thingol's part, that his attitude towards the men is misguided, and only likely to lead to bad things, right? Only bad stuff can come from this kind of prohibition. There is the potential of things being good with men, but he's shutting off any possibility of a positive connection by doing that. Okay. Well, we didn't even get to Thingol. That's okay. We'll start with Thingol and Círdan. I don't want to leave Círdan because there are some really interesting concepts about Círdan that we need to touch base on, because I agree with Círdan. We want to come back and discuss, remember Círdan's vision? Círdan's calling, right? Círdan stayed not out of apathy, but for a reason, because he felt that he had a calling that he had to fulfill to be Círdan the shipwright, making ships in order to help elves go across the sea. And it really looks like that's a non-starter, right? This vision that he was pretty confident that he had, this destiny that he felt that he was fulfilling, is now kind of being shut off, right? There is no going back across the sea. How does he take that, right? How does he take that? Yeah. Anyway, I agree. That would be a fascinating way to kind of follow up Círdan's role as discovering the kinslaying, discovering the reality of the new Valinorian situation, the death of Olwe. Remember, he and Olwe were like a team, right? Olwe on the one side and him on the other. Now Olwe's dead and Valinor is cut off. What now? It makes perfect sense to me that Círdan, our Círdan, with the story that we gave to him back in season 2, is going to be facing a crisis now, an identity crisis, right? A sort of occupational crisis, right? What's he do? What's his point? So I definitely want to come back to seeing him work through that, and we can talk about him and Thingol next time as well. Okay, so this was a really good discussion about Galadriel and the Green Elves. I am loving the idea of the more I think about this as a way to begin to set the stage for Lothlorien to come, the more I really like this idea. There's obviously a long road between now and the final establishment of Lothlorien, but I really like the direction that's going, and really glad to work out. The whole unfriendship of the Green Elves thing has been kind of niggling at me because, as I said, we only waved our hands at it before. So really glad to work that out more. Okay. Very good. Let us stop there. We'll return to Thingol and Círdan, and then we've got to do the catch and release program. We've got to think about the bad guys. We've got to, there's still plenty of other things that we have to do here. So, no problem. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. I think we might have. There we go. Hang on. I'm hearing the fan. Are you back, Trish?
Yes, no, I'm here. Yeah, I turned I turned so I can say goodbye. Goodbye.
Excellent.
I've been listening the whole time. I've been laughing, but you didn't hear me laugh because I was muted.
Right. Yes, exactly. Because your mic was muted. Absolutely. Okay.
Right.
Very good. So thanks everybody for joining us. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thanks. See you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. I think we should be okay with the regular 2 week schedule for now. I don't have anything imminent that I know of coming up that would necessarily lead to changing the schedule. That, my travel calendar, a lot less. We're in the middle of the period where originally I was planning to be holding moose in 3 different countries on 3 different continents within 6 weeks of each other. None of that is happening right now, of course. So my travel calendar, a lot more tame than it was projecting to be. So anyway, it means some good things for the projected schedule. So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you guys in a fortnight.
Bye.
Bye now.
Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.